Welcome to the Dr. Broadway Podcast, the musical theater history podcast where a couple of doctors sit around and talk about Broadway. I'm your co-host, Dr. Kristin Stultz Pressley, joined as always by Dr. Tracey Brent-Chessum. Tracey, tell us what we're going to talk about today.
Today we do the second episode, not episode 2. My goodness, we are not at episode 2.
We are not. Let's be specific. We're at episode 23.
Oh, see, I knew it wasn't episode 2.
It is not
but
episode 2.
It's the second episode of this Bookish micromester.
Yes.
We're going to just submit micromester to the dictionary.
I love that.
To add it.
Let's
I
do
just
it.
love it.
Let's do it.
So we're looking at those touring musicals that are based on books. This week we're talking about The Notebook, which premieres in 2024. So just about a year ago right now.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
But it's based on a book by Nicholas Sparks of the same title. There's also a major blockbuster film.
Yeah, there's a lot of blockbusters associated with this title for sure. Both the book and the film were massive hits. So we'll talk about that in just a minute. But as I was thinking through this episode, Tracey, and really all, whether it's a jukebox musical based on a book, whatever, I wonder... And this is the portion of the show where I put Tracey on the spot. But every week I'm going to try this now.
This is wonderful.
I wonder, what are there certain qualities that you think make something rife for adaptation? Like, what do you think makes a good piece of musical theater in terms of storytelling? And I ask you because you've been involved.
From books?
Well, not necessarily from books, just from any source material. What would you look at? I know that you said in the past that you can read something and it sings to you, which I cannot relate to because that is not, I'm not a theater creator. I'm a historian, right? So I see the world totally differently. But I wonder, what would make you look at one piece of source material and say, oh, that will work, and another piece of source material and say that does not work, do the next thing up? I wonder if there's anything you could think of.
I mean, honestly, you're looking for a single character with a pre-existing arc. And when I say arc, we're talking about kind of like a well-made play, climactic play structure, like something that has a beginning, middle, and end. And, a lot of times we can we can make a life story. If you think about something like Hamilton, we can take some liberties and make some, moments happen where we need them to happen to make sure that the audience gets that payoff, right? Mm-hmm. We can move events around in that. But really, I mean, what you're looking for is somebody who has a compelling story, like a single person. We did a musical called Crazy Mary Lincoln, and they set out to write a musical about Mary, and they realized that she was not as compelling as her son.
Interesting.
That, Robert Todd Lincoln was... really the driver of the story.
Yeah.
Because she was a woman, he made all the decisions for her. And so everything was just out of her hands. And so, she's like halfway through the show, she would just lose her agency. Yeah. And so it's like, who is this story about? And having to kind of rethink that and recraft that. That was probably one of the most, fulfilling experiences of my time developing new work, was just looking at that and going, hey, I'm not really sure that Mary is the person who's, and she seems rife for, oh my goodness, I can hear her sing, because you have that, right? But sometimes the source material doesn't give you what you need to actually make a show, because we have expectations of shows that we do not have expectations of in history books or even in novels.
Right.
Like, you can write Crazy Mary Lincoln going crazy pretty effectively and keep that going for a while, talking about the day-to-day. But, you know, at some point something has to happen.
Right.
Right? In order, like, there has to be some agency, something needs to move, the story needs to move forward. And we don't have the expectations about timing in theater, in books that we do in the theater. Like, a book can wrap itself all up at the very end and keep you hanging to the last minute, and then the last 10 pages, it's like, oh, how did I not see that coming?
Right.
But we do not allow for that in musical theater.
Yeah.
Like, we would riot if we waited until the last 5 minutes to tell us what actually happened. Then everybody'd just be like, I haven't even had time to process it.
Yeah.
That's just not how we work. That's not how we expect our theater to be presented to us. So does that...
No, that's really helpful.
Put me on the spot.
I know. I got to quit doing that. But I think that's a great answer. And I was just curious to hear your point of view on it, because like I said, I've not developed a show on my own. I've not gone through that process. That's not what I've done. So I was just curious to hear, you know, it seems like a lot of shows now are being picked up for Broadway that have, and we've talked about this, I'm not being specific to The Notebook. We've talked about it in terms of, you know, music catalogs when we were in the jukebox musicals.
Yeah.
Picked up for Broadway because of name ID, because of the economics of it. And we've talked about that as well. And I started thinking last night as I was getting ready for this episode, just thinking, you know, maybe the producing side is running that, you know, it goes hand in hand. You can't have one without the other.
Yeah.
But they have to find a happy medium between what producers think will sell tickets and what an artist can create and make a compelling story out of, right? And so
the best partnerships are the one where art and commerce are constantly in conflict.
Yeah.
Like, if there isn't grand amount of tension right there, then nobody's really doing their job.
Yeah.
So you're actually looking for that. Respectful tension, but tension nonetheless.
Right.
Because if you don't have that strong tension from, say, the producing side, you end up sometimes with a weak libretto or a weak, you know, that kind of thing, because the artists aren't pushing back and saying, no, the art demands this, and this is why. So how do we come to something? It doesn't mean that compromise isn't necessary. It just means that tension has to be there.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, again, having nothing to do specifically with this show, it was just something that I thought of last night. Like, that would be an interesting conversation to have, and something that if you asked me, I would have no idea how to answer, because that's just not what I do. So,
and producers come by it honestly. Like, part of it is, you know, we talked about this on the episode last week, was just the fact that they keep saying, hey, we're not recouping costs.
Right.
It's too expensive to produce on Broadway, and so we're not recouping our things unless they run for, you know, at least 2 years. And everybody's going, what's happening there? And, you know, equity's pushing back against that narrative. But the problem is that audiences are not growing fast enough to keep up with inflation. This is just, obviously, we're going to kind of piggyback on what we did last week, but I've been writing a paper for Astor, a conference paper where I'm going to go and present at a conference, and I had to turn in the first draft.
And let's define Astor. Let's define Astor.
Oh, the American Society of Theater Research.
Thank you.
Yes. This is where a whole bunch of crazy people like me get together in a room and, like, share their papers. Most people would just be like, please shoot me in the head. Like, but we have so much fun sitting in a tiny little room in a hotel somewhere being like, yay, this is what I found in an archive. So anyway, so I did this paper, and I'm still working on it because the data that we have is so scant. But one of the primary things that I saw in this paper was that the Broadway League reports their grosses and reports their earnings every year. And they're saying that audiences are, like, we don't have the audiences for this. Audiences are growing, but they're growing at a rate of like 2.5%.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not keeping up with inflation.
Mm-hmm.
And so they are growing. They can't say, oh, we're losing audiences, because we're not technically. Every year, even on their website, if you go there, you can see it's going up and up and up and up and up and up and up. But it's just not rising with the pace of inflation. And so that's, that's the issue. But it's hard to explain that, I think, to people.
Yeah. It's hard for me to understand. It's hard for me to understand.
Yeah.
Right. And it's hard for me to understand. And just as a point of information for any listeners who are interested, you can go to the Broadway League's website and look at any show and see how well they're selling. You can see their highest ticket prices and their lowest ticket prices, their average ticket prices, their best week, their, what percentage of capacity they're operating at. And it's a really fascinating exercise. I don't know how to compute that sort of information, but I do find it really interesting to have access to it. So that's available to anyone. You don't need to log in. You don't need a membership. You can just look and see, kind of the financial side of Broadway, even though, again, it's a great mystery to all of us, I think.
Yeah. But I mean, one of the points in this paper that I was making was that, the general consensus is that we're losing audiences, we're not growing, especially because there's this fear of that oncoming cliff of kind of baby boomer audiences going away, as they age, and who's going to replace them, and how are we going to do this? And there's that fear. But the whole point behind this paper was just to kind of look at it and say, we can't keep perpetuating the narrative that we're losing audiences, because we're not losing audiences. Audiences are growing. They're just not outpacing inflation. And so that is making the shows even more expensive.
Right.
Because with inflation, it means that we cannot really raise those ticket prices, or else we risk losing all the audiences.
Yeah.
We're going to outpace their pocketbooks. So we can't raise it, but it's costing more to produce now than it ever did before.
Yeah. Yep.
So.
Yep. And, another place, and you probably talk about this in your paper, although maybe you're focused only on New York, but if you look around the country, it's going gangbusters. Broadway is selling like gangbusters across the country. So that's kind of my wheelhouse, is being in touring houses and seeing that those shows are selling out like
and the touring on it, and the touring audiences are on the Broadway League as well.
Yes, that's right.
So you have Broadway audiences and touring. And what I did, I went through and stacked everything, as well as regional audience data from the TCG magazine.
Yeah.
I don't know, what does TCG stand for? Theater
Communications Group.
Okay.
What she's talking about is American Theater, is the Theater Communications Group, which is, they do like Art Search, which is a periodical where you can get job postings for the arts, and then American Theater, which is now it's quarterly magazine about American theater, appropriately enough.
But TCG is also something that the regional theaters can join together.
Yes, that's right.
They collect data on all of the theaters that are not touring houses, the regional theaters, the small theaters in your area. But compiling all of this data together, looking at touring and Broadway and the regional scene, audiences are going up.
Yep.
They're just not outpacing inflation. So
and there was this expectation when Hamilton came, okay, our subscriber bases will pop for a couple of years while everybody sees Hamilton, and then they'll dive.
And it didn't.
And it did not dive.
It did not do that.
It has not dived, whatever it is. It has not gone back down. It's astounding. I mean, I talk to theater operators that I work with, and they're like, no, we're still at 93, 98, whatever percent.
Because you brought in a whole bunch of people who wouldn't normally do this, and they had a good time.
Leave. Yeah, that's right.
They were like,
leave.
Yeah.
Great. So I think that baby boomer audience that we're losing over time, I think there will be an audience to replace it. It's building now. But it's, it's just a wait and see. It's one of those things, as we've said so many times on this podcast, we cannot, as historians at this moment, tell you how this trajectory is going to go. It hasn't happened yet. We can prognosticate, we can use, future or past to predict future, but we cannot say with certainty.
No.
So it's an interesting thing to discuss. But that's not why we're here today.
No, it's not.
As
we always do this. I swear.
As usual.
Yeah.
We're actually here today to talk about The Notebook, which, as Tracey said, premiered on Broadway in March, I believe, of 2024 at the Gerald Schoenfeld Theater. Am I saying that right? Schoenfeld? I'd already Schoenfeld. Yeah. So let's talk about it. And of course, if you know anything about The Notebook, you know that a conversation about it has to start with one Mr. Nicholas Sparks. So let me tell you about Nicholas Sparks, because I think this is just such a fascinating and unbelievable rise that he had at such a young age. So we're going to talk today about two creators. Basically, we're going to talk about Nicholas Sparks, who wrote the book, the original source material for this show. And we're going to talk about Ingrid Michaelson, who is the singer-songwriter who wrote the music and lyrics for the show. So first, we're going to talk about Nicholas Sparks and find out how he came up with the story, how it was initially received, and all of those things. And then we'll talk about how we get to the musical. So Nicholas Sparks was born in Nebraska, and his family bounced around the Midwest. From what I've read, his father was in graduate school. So as his dad's, career kind of bounced them around, they were in Minnesota for a while and a couple of different places in Nebraska. And ultimately they settled in California when Nicholas was 8. And so he's raised in California like Tracey. He went to Notre Dame on a track and field scholarship. So he moves back to the Midwest, going to Notre Dame in South Bend, Indiana. And while he was there, I've read it was his freshman year, early in his career. I don't want to stake my claim that it was, because sometimes people get their facts wrong, but from what I've read, it was his freshman year, and he had a knee injury. And he was, here's this kid who's always been so active, always been so successful at different sports, and suddenly he is sidelined, and he was not handling it well. And so his mom said, don't just sit there pouting, do something, write a book, she said. Which is, what I don't know is, was he already kind of dabbling in writing, or did she just know that he had a propensity for being creative? I don't know what made her say, write a book, when she told him to do something. But for whatever reason, she said, write a book. And he thought, you know what? That's not a terrible idea. I think I'll give that a shot. And so he gave it a shot, and he wrote some, little things in college. Nothing that was memorable, nothing that remains, nothing that persists to this day. But it is an important moment in time, because it's when, he really started to think, you know what, maybe I will write. Maybe this is something that I can do, something that I'm interested in. Also of note is that while he was in college at Notre Dame, he goes on a spring break trip to Florida, and that's where he meets his future wife, Kathy. Kathy will become important in this story for reasons you will soon find out. But they meet on spring break, and he says as soon as he sees her, he knows she's the woman that he wants to marry, which sounds like something straight out of a Nicholas Sparks novel, does it not? And so he recognizes her immediately as someone very special to him, and they, of course, start dating. Then he graduates from Notre Dame, and he thinks he's going to go to law school, but he's rejected from law school. So he kind of bounces around in different career fields. He starts off as a waiter while he tries to figure things out. Then he becomes a real estate appraiser, and then he becomes a dental, what do you call it? Dental, like they sell the big equipment to dentists and the machine
salesman.
Yeah, dental salesman. I don't know how else to put it.
Equipment.
Dental equipment salesman. However you would say that. I don't know. And ultimately, he becomes a pharmaceutical salesman. And this is by his late 20s that he's doing this. And he's also, by his late 20s, married to Kathy, the woman that he met on spring break in Florida. And they're living in New Bern, North Carolina. If you've read the book, The Notebook, you know that is where The Notebook is set. And it's set there because it's inspired by Kathy's grandparents and their love story. They had been married at this point for around 60 years, and he just thought they had such a beautiful story of, you know, sticking together through thick and thin, survival against all odds, helping each other when things got tough. You know, the for better or for worse thing had really played out in their lives. And he thought it was such a really, really beautiful story. But he's working, you know, every day as a pharmaceutical salesman. He and Kathy at this point have 2 young sons. So he's really just living the suburban dad life and loving it. And again, by this point, he was in his late 20s. Well, in May of 1993, he was watching the final episode of Cheers, which Tracey and I have discussed Thursday night TV by way of The Cosby Show, which we mentioned when we talked about Hell's Kitchen. Alicia Keys had guest starred on that show when she was a little girl. Cheers, for those who don't know, was part of that lineup. There was The Cosby Show
of the night.
Yes, that's right.
I wasn't allowed to stay up till the end. I just had to go back. I had to go to bed after The Cosby Show.
Well, I was allowed because my parents were huge fans of Cheers, and they would let me watch it. I probably should have been in bed, but Mom and Daddy, I don't think, wanted to get up off the couch to tuck me in, so they're like,
"Just stay
you watch it with us." So yeah, it was The Cosby Show at 8, and then Family Ties at 8:30, and then Cheers came on 9 to 9:30. Iconic show. Actually, my husband and I have watched it after we got married. You know, you're always looking for shows to binge as you're winding down to go to sleep. And one of us came up with the idea, like, let's watch Cheers as adults. And we did. And I will tell you, it holds up. I was amazed.
Yeah.
It really, I enjoyed it. First of all, I was shocked my parents let me watch it as an 8-year-old. Second of all, I really enjoyed it as an adult. So I got why they didn't want to get off the couch to tuck me in. But at any rate, he's watching the final episode of that show, which aired in May of 1993. And what happens is he realizes, wait a minute, this show has been on for 12 years, and I first started writing back in college 12 years ago. And this show is over, but I have done absolutely nothing more with my writing, right? And it kind of brought that back to him, and he was like, I really enjoyed that. Maybe I need to try that again. So he decides he's going to give writing another go. Now, he's going to keep doing his pharmaceutical sales job because, of course, he doesn't know what's ahead. He doesn't know if he's going to be any good at it. He has no clue. So he just decides, you know what? I'm going to start writing again. And that's exactly what he does. And when he does, he thinks of his wife, Kathy, and the story of her grandparents. And he decides that's what he's going to write. And so, you know, they tell you, write what you know. So he borrows from his wife's grandparents' story and decides he's going to write that. He starts writing in July of 1994 and finishes in December of 1994. And people would hear, you know, they'd say, what are you writing? What are you writing? And he'd tell them it was a love story that involved Alzheimer's. And they would be like, wait, what? Alzheimer's and a love story? And he would respond, trust me, it'll be good. It'll be good. Little did he know just how good it would be, right? So he knew that he had something special when he completed the manuscript in December of 2024. He gives it to his wife to look over, and she immediately starts sobbing. Like, it resonated with her, and he knew he had something special. And so he sends his manuscript, well, not the full manuscript. He sends a couple of chapters to 25 different agents. All of them reject him except for one. And the reason this one particular agent didn't reject him is because she had recently passed away. So she was not alive to personally reject him. But her assistant happened to see the chapters that he'd sent on, you know, the agent's desk, and she read them over and thought, you know, this isn't half bad. So she sent it to another agent. And that agent that she sent it to read the pages and called Sparks and said, what else have you got? Can you send me some more? And he did. And within a week, she was like, okay, I'm on. I think you've got something really big here. I'm on board to be a part of this. I'll represent you. And so she had him create 25 different copies of it so that they could, you know, back in the day, it had to be hard copy. I mean, this was 1990, I guess probably 95 at this point, because he'd completed writing in 94. So
let me talk about how long it takes to do that. In the 1990s.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So
it's a lot of time at Kinko's. I mean, at least he had Kinko's. At least point.
He had Kinko's. I tell you what, my college apartment, there was a Kinko's like a 1/10 of a mile away, and boy, did I spend some time in there.
I know.
I still
the one present I gave myself.
Still there.
Like, I was a very, very poor grad student, but when I finished my dissertation, I had to make 9 copies for the committee to read.
Yes.
I went to Kinko's and I said, "You do it. I will pay for you to do it. I do not need to do this."
No, exactly. But that's what he had to do. 25 copies of the manuscript. I imagine he probably splurged and had them all bound with the spiral binding that you can do, how it went back then. So she sends 25 copies to different big publishers and said, you know what, let's just wait and see what happens. She really believed in it. She really thought it was something very special. And that gave him hope. And so he was beginning to think, I might get a really significant advance for this. As excited as she is about it, he was hoping for a $50,000 advance, which would be the modern equivalent of $100,000. Instead, he got a call from Warner Books and they offered him $1 million.
Oh, wow.
In advance. That, Tracey, is the modern equivalent of $2 million.
Well, I mean, I was like, oh, it's that good. Oh, yeah. That's nice.
I mean, a debut novel for a guy who just basically on a whim starts writing to make $1 million advance, that is unbelievable. Mm-hmm. Like, when I saw that number, this was 1996, well, it was 95 when he made that deal, 96 when the book came out. That is unbelievable to me. But to put it in context, if you remember when we talked about Les Mis, Victor Hugo got the modern equivalent of $3 million for Les Miserables. But he was Victor Hugo. And when he got that, he was Victor Hugo, right?
Yes, this wasn't debut novel.
Nicholas Sparks was a pharmaceutical salesman in New Bern, North Carolina. Very different, had no proven track record, and he still got $1 million. And this is even more shocking to me. So after he signed,
how much did her grandparents ask for? You just based this on our lives.
Right.
Did he have to do some kickbacks?
That's a very fair question. I don't know that. But so he gets the $1 million advance in 1995. And then days later, he's driving to Hilton Head, South Carolina. And while he was on his way to Hilton Head, he strikes the deal to sell the movie rights before the book has even been published.
Yeah.
He has sold the movie rights. So, immediately, I don't know what it was about this story, but immediately both book publishers and movie producers saw it as, rife for production, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it was a big deal from the very, very beginning. The book comes out in 1996. He takes a short leave of absence from his job in pharmaceutical sales. Actually, interestingly, he lived in my hometown of Greenville, South Carolina at that point. He lived actually in Simpsonville, which is a little tiny suburb of Greenville, but not tiny anymore, but then it was. And so I remember when this all hit because he was a hometown guy, even though he wasn't from Greenville and had just recently moved there from New Bern. That was home for him when this all happened in 1996. I was a student at Furman at the time. So at any rate, the book comes out. He swears he's going to keep working as a pharmaceutical salesman. First of all, he had no idea it was going to be so successful. But second of all, he said, I want my children to see their dad getting up and going to work every day, right? I want them to have that, my sons to have that example. I don't know how long that lasted after the enormous success of this book, but nevertheless, that was his intent at that point.
That's when you get the home office and you say,
That's right.
My wife works from home, and my 2-year-old's, no, she's going to work.
She's at work.
She goes to this. I was like, she's like, is Mama coming up? And I'm like, no, she's still working. Oh, Mama's still working? Yeah.
Yes.
So they get that too.
Yeah. Well, and I have a home office as well. And I will say when my children come in, I'll be like, I'm working.
Go away.
Give me space. They're not good at doing that.
No.
Your girls may be better than my boys, but my boys are not good at it. And they're much older than your girls, so they should have a lot more practice, and yet they are not good at it.
Is one in the room right now because...
Well, he tiptoed through a minute ago.
He tiptoed through? Okay.
He did tiptoe through. Anyway, so the book ends up coming out in 1996. It sells more than 130 million copies. 130 million copies. I cannot even believe it. And it's translated into 50 different languages. And then, of course, we finally get almost 10 years later. It takes 8 years for the film adaptation to come out. But in 2004, the film comes out, and it stars, of course, Ryan Gosling and Rachel McAdams in the roles of Allie and Noah, or Noah and Allie, respectively. It was made for $29 million and grossed $118 million. I mean, we all know, right? We all know the success of The Notebook, but, you know, I imagine that for years, a story that successful had probably been in the minds of different producers to put on Broadway. So now we're going to talk a little bit about how that actually happened. And that's where we encounter Ingrid Michaelson. So Ingrid Michaelson, who wrote the music and lyrics for the musical, was born and raised in Staten, New York. Her mom was an artist who ran the Staten Island Museum, and her dad was a songwriter, like she would eventually be, who had a day job. So he wasn't a full-time songwriter. He wasn't associated with a band or any songwriting team, but he nevertheless was a songwriter. When Ingrid was 9, she started performing with this city-run theater program in New York called Kids on Stage. And it was really enormously impactful for her. She said, I was Velcroed to my mother, but acting helped me feel like I could do things on my own. Now, you and I have both worked in educational theater and seen the impacts that it can have. I mean, the stories that I could tell. I worked at a children's theater throughout my college years. I would teach classes, and the stories I could tell of seeing kids, you know, come into class on day one and then be completely different humans by the end of that class, just because they had been opened up in a new and fresh and beautiful way to, you know, the magic of theater and what they could do behind the mask of a costume or the mask of a character that they probably never thought that they could do. And that's exactly what happened with Ingrid. So at the age of 9, she starts dreaming of being on Broadway. They didn't go see Broadway shows very often because it just wasn't in the budget, but they would see summer stock productions, you know, community theater closer to home in Staten Island. Even if it wasn't on Broadway, she did see as much theater as she could. Just on a smaller scale than Broadway. And like I said, she participated in Kids on Stage anytime that she was able to. She studied musical theater in college. So, you know, it was enough of impact on her life that it's what she eventually studied in college. In fact, she was accepted into New York's NYU's Tisch School for the Arts. So early on, I mean, even not that wouldn't have been that early on, but as she's going into college, she's clearly got the chops to get into NYU, right? Not just anybody gets into Tisch School for the Arts. So she got in, but she didn't want to saddle her parents with all of that debt. That tuition was much higher than at a different school. So, and didn't involve living in Manhattan. So she ends up going to SUNY Binghamton, where she studied musical theater. She graduated in 2001. And at that point, she's ready to go to New York to audition and to make her way in musical theater. But in 2001, as we've discussed, the World Trade Center is attacked. Everything in the whole wide world changes, as we've discussed, particularly in the Mamma Mia episode. And everything about performing in theater felt really frivolous to her after that moment. You know, I'm sure that she had, well, in fact, she said her dad had to walk home 2 miles after the attacks. I mean, he was working in New York City. He had to walk home. I mean, it was personally impactful for her, and just everything.
Caroline's mom had to do that too.
Yeah. Wow.
Caroline's mom worked for the federal court system.
Yeah.
And she walked home from basically from the Congress building.
Wow.
All the way across the river into Arlington. She just took off her shoes, her heels.
And you know, you couldn't get a call out, right? Because
you couldn't get a call out. You couldn't get your car out. Like everybody, I mean, because everybody thought they were going to come hit DC. So yeah, she walked home I don't know how she did it.
That's unreal to think of.
And you didn't have the cell phone to be like, all right, I'm across the bridge, come pick me up.
That's right. Exactly. Exactly. Or even to say, I'm alive, don't worry about me. You know what I mean? I mean, I know so many stories of, we didn't know until later that night when she finally made it home, or he finally walked in the door, that he had survived. It's just unbelievable. But you can see how that would give you so much perspective, especially hitting as close to home as it did for her, who was born in and around, or born and raised in and around New York, whose dad was one of those walking home on 9/11. She just said, this feels very, very frivolous. I don't want anything to do with it. So she starts writing, and she decides she's going to follow in her father's footsteps and write music. And then she does become kind of this indie pop gal, right?
Yeah,
and
she's got a following too.
Yeah, absolutely. She really does. She really does. And so her biggest hit was The Way I Am. I would sing it, but I'm not going to, but I could.
You will remember it. You'd remember it.
It was a very, I remember it being viral on social media. Like it was one of those viral sounds.
It was the same vein as like Sarah Bareilles, and there's several
singer-songwriters
from London specifically, and they all kind of came out around the same time.
Yes. And similar to Lisa Loeb, and she was more from the 90s, but she reminds me a lot of Lisa Loeb, like quirky, indie, really fun, just fun music. But The Way I Am is, I'll hum it. 'Cause I love the way you say good morning, right?
Oh.
And you take me the way I am. I did sing it.
That was very nice.
Thank you.
That.
I said I would.
I wasn't going to sing it because I was like, I don't remember it that well.
I know. I was like, people will know this song, but they won't know the title. Like, I didn't recognize the title. I certainly knew the jingle, right?
The jingle, yeah.
Because it was all over social media. It was also an Old Navy ad, but it only hit number 37 on the Billboard chart. So it's not like it was a huge radio hit. But that was kind of the story of her life. You know, she would have popular hits with people that didn't necessarily show up on the chart. So she had this following, but it wasn't necessarily a mainstream.
No, it's very indie kind of.
Yeah, exactly. So in 2014, her mom dies of sepsis. As you can imagine, this is devastating to her. Yeah. Soon after, she and her husband separate. And again, she had one of those turning points where it was like, music feels stupid, just like theater had felt stupid and frivolous back in 2001. Suddenly, in the aftermath of these agonizing life events, the breakup of a marriage, and
she's
the
touring
death of her mom. Yeah, she's touring, so and she doesn't want to do it anymore. Yeah, she's like, I don't want to be on the road. Yeah, I don't either. And so she sells the rights to her recordings and just starts thinking about musical theater again. So all of a sudden, she's making the intentional choice of, I am stepping away from songwriting and I am going to go into musical theater, which is what I'd wanted to go into when I was 9 years old. But it was one of those intentional choices that we saw her make in 2001, just in reverse, right? So she's really coming full circle, and she starts fantasizing about writing her own musical, and probably was inspired by Sarah Bareilles, who right around this time is writing Waitress. And in fact, she even texted Bareilles and told her as much, and Sarah Bareilles was like, you can do it, you can do it, you can do it. Well, not long after that, in 2016, she starts dating Will Chase. Now, Will Chase is a name known to Broadway fans and fans of shows like Nashville and Smash, the television show, and Nashville, of course, being a television show. Will Chase, at the time that they started dating, was playing Shakespeare. He'd stepped in for Christian Borle, who is the original Shakespeare in Something Rotten. And so they start dating, and at the wrap party for the show, it closed in January, very early January of 2017. So at the wrap party for the show, Will Chase says to Kevin McCollum, who was the producer of Something Rotten, as well as Rent and In the Heights, and later Six and The Drowsy Chaperone and all kinds of great shows. And Will Chase says to producer Kevin McCollum, hey, Ingrid wants to write a musical. Well, oh, does she now? Does she now? McCollum is thinking. So before long, McCollum and Michelson have a meeting, and it was at that meeting that he mentioned the possibility of musicalizing The Notebook. And I love to hear the two responses of McCollum, who was in the meeting, and Michelson. So McCollum says, "You know how cats can stand on a couch, do a flip, and land in the same place? Her whole body opened up and metaphorically did a full-on flip." That's how McCollum remembers it. Michelson remembers, "I had to excuse myself and go to the bathroom and cry my eyes out because I loved that story for so long. And the idea of turning it into a musical completely overwhelmed me." So obviously, this is an idea that they think, okay, we got to pursue this. And he told her at the end of the meeting, "Why don't you go home and write me a couple of songs, and when you get them ready, send them to me, and we'll see what might happen." Well, within, he's thinking, give her a couple of months, right? But within 2 hours, she had texted him a voice note with her singing one of the songs that remains in the show to this day. Mm-hmm. So it was she was very quickly inspired. She drew very much upon the death of her own mother, right? Kind of recalling the agony of that and that loss. And she also drew upon things that her father, who actually died in 2017 of Parkinson's, she drew upon things that he would say as a widower, right? Yeah. Looking back on the loss of her mother. And so she really had that in her toolkit to bring to writing this adaptation. And she would, continue sending, every now and then she would send McCollum a new song. And finally he said, "Okay, I think you're hired." I get it. You got this. You got this.
You want to do this.
Yeah, that's right. But also in 2017, so that was January 2017. In summer 2017, she makes her Broadway premiere, not as a writer, but as a performer. She stepped into the cast of Natasha Pierre and the Great Comet of 1812, replacing Britton Ashford as Sonia in that show. So she played it not till the closing date, but for a couple of months in the summer of 2017, leading up to the close of that show. So she's performing on Broadway. She's, reintroducing herself to the community of creating in theater that she had loved so much as a child. And she's dating Will Chase, who is certainly part of the furniture in the Broadway world, and is more and more realizing, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to do. So the show, The Notebook, the musical, is announced in 2019. Michael Greif is going to direct. You might know that name from Rent, as well as other things that he has created, but certainly Rent would be his banner credit. Librettist Becca Brunstetter is brought in to write the book. She's from North Carolina.
And she's very good. I mean, she was part of the writing team for This Is Us, if you watch television.
That's right.
I know her because she kind of got her start, well, not her start, but one of the things that she does is the Women's Voices Festival in DC at the same time as my company is doing the Voice Festival, the Women's Voices Festival. And she ends up on the Kilroy list. So she is very, very good at creating environment, very, very good at creating warmth and hominess in kind of, and creating like a culture for characters to live in. Yeah. She really does do a really good job of that. And if you watch This Is Us, you probably get that. But yeah, she's very, very good. So
yeah, and this rang true with her. She's a North Carolina native. The story from the book is set in North Carolina. The film, of course, changed it to South Carolina, around Charleston, Seabrook Island, but around Charleston, South Carolina. Well,
because it's prettier.
That's right.
Sorry.
No, it's fair. But it was originally set in New Bern, North Carolina, and Brunstetter's from North Carolina. In fact, I think her dad had been a state senator from North Carolina. So at any rate, it is then workshopped at Vassar's Powerhouse Theater in June of 2019. This is something, it's in the biography of Hamilton. The development of Hamilton was also workshopped. One of its several workshops was done at Powerhouse Theater in Vassar. And so after, a relatively successful workshop there in June of 2019, the show is expected to premiere on Broadway in the fall of 2020. But guess what happened?
I have no idea. Like, what happened?
There was no theater. You would not believe this, Tracey. You will not believe it. There was no theater happening. Closed down March 12th, 2020, and didn't come back until like September 20-something, 2022. So
we were in New York.
Yes.
March 5th through 9th.
Okay.
And we saw all the shows. We were like in all of these big spaces.
Yeah.
And then we came home and they shut everything down. And then I got the sniffles.
Oh,
and
no.
I freaked out.
I bet you
and
did.
And so I sent the thing and I was like, can somebody, I'm really sick.
Yes.
And I had to go down there. I had to like walk in. They had hazmat suits on.
Oh, I believe
no
it.
joke. Hazmat. Like full like air on their backs.
Pictures.
And I was like, holy moly. And they were like, what were you doing in New York? And I was like, I was seeing Broadway shows. So.
Well, did you have COVID?
No.
Oh.
I just had the sniffles after all that.
That's hilarious. So anyway, obviously COVID shuts everything down, but guess what? It finally begins to get up and running after the COVID shutdown. And when it does, there's been some changes made. So in September 2022, the show premieres at Chicago Shakespeare Theater. And by that point, they've brought in Shelley Williams as co-director. Now, Shelley Williams is a name that should be familiar to listeners of this podcast because episode numero uno in the Tony's on Tour was about The Wiz. And she directed that production that we spoke about of The Wiz that's currently touring, that subsequently played Broadway and then is, gone back out on tour. So that's Shelley Williams, who's brought in as co-director of The Notebook, that's an unusual arrangement, but more and more, you even see that now at some regional theaters. They've got a two-headed model instead of, it used to be an artistic director, at the head of a regional theater. Now we're seeing an executive director and an artistic director, we're separating the powers differently now than we used to. So it brings in some fresh perspectives and kind of takes, it just kind of spreads the power around a little bit and gets some fresh perspectives, which is good. That
as a director?
What's that?
As a director?
Yeah, tell me.
Or someone who has done that in the past.
Yes, tell me.
I don't know how that works.
Yeah, that would be difficult. I would imagine.
You have to be like really good friends and really be on the same page and really be able to kind of do this and that to be able to kind of, share some ideas on that one. But
yeah, I agree.
That it's funny. We were talking about this particular change right before we started recording, and I was like, "Do you know what happened? No. Do you know what happened? Someday we're gonna figure out why." They decided to do this because they are both excellent directors in their own right.
Very accomplished.
Obviously didn't need
the
other person to get this job done. So what was the discussion in the room? In the room where it happened?
I think I think part of it was, just expanding, broadening the horizons kind of thing, bringing in different voices, listening, I think that was part of that moment. And I definitely think that it was like you said, they're both great directors. So to have two great minds, two minds are better than one, right? So it worked, and it worked in this case. It premieres at the Chicago Shakespeare Festival in September of 2022, and a reviewer for the Tribune said it was a significant leap in artistic quality over its sources, so meaning both the book and the film. It said it respects those two sources, but it also provides a clear, resonant, and unique voice of its own. And that's one thing that Michelson has said over and over and over again as she's talked about the show, is how it was so important that they didn't just rely on what had already been done, but that they pulled these characters out and really told their story in a new, fresh way. And so that's what they were attempting to do. They've also changed the timeline of the story. The book is set in the 30s and 40s, and the film as well. This is the 60s and 70s that they've moved the story up to. So there's some other changes there. And for this reviewer for the Chicago Tribune, it was a big win. So that was September 2022. It finally premieres on Broadway March 14 of 2024. It's a $15 million production, which, if you've been listening, is not that high.
Very small.
Yeah, that is not that big a production budget for a show today, right? We're into the 32 million stage now, and this is less than half of that. So it premieres on Broadway in March of 2024 at the Schoenfeld Theater. It's nominated for 3 Tonys. 2 performers were nominated, and then Brunstetter was nominated for the book, but none of them win. And then it closes December 15th. So after about 7 months and 317 performances.
And it does not recoup its investment.
It does not recoup its, which that surprised me, because it's, like we said, it's a small investment. I can't imagine it has a huge running budget because it's a small cast, right?
It is a small cast, much smaller than Cabaret when we were talking about it.
Yeah. So it goes back to that conversation that we've had in recent weeks of there's not a lot of transparency in these.
Like, it's like, what are they being charged for? Like, I mean, it's like, it's like I've produced shows before, and I'm still kind of like, okay,
yeah,
that can't be that much.
I know.
I mean, it's
right?
like, wait a minute, hold on. How do we make this work? Even with like, you know, the equity prices and this, that, and the other thing, like all of these things just don't quite add up in my brain. But I don't know, I mean, what their grosses were.
Well, I do. I looked at the grosses.
Did you?
Yes, I did. I'm always curious to see, you know, and it ran, I would say, very healthy. However, healthy now is different from healthy 20 years ago. Well, so a show could run for a really long time at 80% capacity.
Yeah.
Now you can't. Yeah. You can't do that. And so it was
you can't pay the bills.
That's right. So
at 80%.
Yeah. Yeah, but this show never got below 75%, and it was more often like 86 to 92%.
Really?
Yeah, so it wasn't like people weren't coming to see it. Now, I'm sure they were paying half price at TKTS.
Yes.
You know, I'm sure there was a good amount of that, but nevertheless, it still had relatively full houses for each week. I mean, there was never a week that it was like 40%. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It stayed pretty full. Now they ran over spring. They opened right around spring break, which is a boon time. They then played through the summer, which is a boon time. And then they played a Christmas season, you know, they closed right before Christmas, but nevertheless had that Thanksgiving to mid-December window when a lot of people are going to New York.
Yeah.
Just, you know, for Christmas in New York, and they see a show as part of that. So they had a couple of really heavy theater going periods, but it never was in the tank in terms of its house capacity.
And one of the reasons for it, and again, this is why we do this, and this is why we do this specifically for things that are on tour, so that you know what you're walking into.
Yeah.
This is a great example of why this helps. But the reviews for the Broadway production did not come back as
favorably
as they did in Chicago. Favorably, that would be an understatement. Yeah. They really got stung pretty badly. The more and more you kind of look at the audience response to this, it all comes back to the fact that a huge portion of the audience was very confused, not necessarily by the script itself. There is a, you know, if you know anything about The Notebook, you're talking about, you know, people in basically 3 time periods. So they have 3 different sets of actors playing Allie and Noah, from the time when they're young to the time when they are older and Allie has Alzheimer's disease. Even with the shifts, like they tell you in screenwriting schools, do not write anything that has like a flashback. You will lose the audience. They won't know what to do with it. And I was like, people break that rule all the time. But in this particular case, there is quite a lot of these time leaps where you have to go forward and backwards and forwards and backwards, because that's how the book is structured. I don't think that was necessarily the thing that people couldn't follow. The issue seems to come down to a lack of racial continuity in the casting. Now, there is a lot of discussion around this, but essentially what they did was they didn't worry about having all of the Alleys be the same race and all of the Noahs be the same race. And I don't think that's what bothered the audience. What the audience kept saying, the response that I was reading, like on Reddit and everywhere else, people were like, I just couldn't figure out who was talking, if this was a new character or if it was not, when we were doing these flashbacks or these flash forwards. They were just a lot of commentary about people being thrown by that.
Yeah.
Now, there was a lot of discussion about it, I think, when it came out, and the producers and the writing team kind of said, as well as the directors, came out with something that said, hey, we're first of all trying to make sure that everybody gets a chance,
right,
to do, to play these roles. And second, we want to make sure that everybody sitting in the audience has more opportunities to see themselves on stage. So therefore, when we cast this, we're not looking at them as like, these are memories of times gone by. They don't have to be consistent, is kind of what they said. And they're right. They don't have to be consistent. We don't have to have that. But that, I think, paired with and this is my personal opinion, trying to kind of dig through what I'm looking at here, it seems like that lack of continuity and the structure with the time leaps really did just throw some people. Mm-hmm. So I think that shows up in a lot of the reviews. It shows up online. It shows up with vehement disgust from Nicholas Sparks lovers who are love that book and really just, as far as they're concerned, it's gold. Like, don't mess with it. Don't monkey with it. They know that this is what they want. But in this particular case, I mean, I don't think what they did to it was, I don't think they made huge changes to it that should really anger people. It's just that people got confused.
Well, and I'll tell you specifically. Okay, so what happens is, and I don't remember how the breakdown is racially, but you have three.
I do.
Okay, go ahead and tell what that is.
So younger Allie and middle Allie are both African American women, and then older Allie is a white woman. Yeah. And this is on Broadway. And then
younger Noah and Noah
were both white actors, and then
older Noah.
Noah was an African American actor.
Yeah. So it was confusing to audiences who came in and they're like, wait, is this a different character? What is happening here?
And I mean, as a director, you want to trust the audience that they will figure it out, give the role to the best. I mean, I come from an academic background, and we do this all the time. It's like, trust the audience that they're going to find their way through, because I need to give it to the best person, because educationally that is my job.
Right.
And most of the time audiences will go to you, but I've had several experiences where they have been lost when we've done something like this.
Well, and as Tracey and I were talking, what that could have on an audience who isn't prepared for it. Now, if you go in knowing that, you go in knowing what to expect, then you're just like, oh yeah, that's older Allie. I know who that is. And so it's not an issue. But if you don't go in with that background information and knowing what's happening, then it's going to take you out of the action of that play. It's going to have a Brechtian effect, which we have talked about before, where Bertolt Brecht, this German director, who wanted the audience to keep its distance from the world of the play, right?
Because you're supposed to be watching with a critical eye and looking and listening.
Exactly.
And, like, making a decision about it.
That's right. But the issue with The Notebook is that it is a story that needs to draw you in, right? You need to be
this is not a critical,
on their every word.
Yeah, it's not a critical commentary on society.
Right, exactly.
I mean, there's some commentary there, but this is not like what Brecht was talking about.
Right.
Like,
right. So while absolutely, you know, any race could play any of those characters and be brilliant at it. It's not about that. It's about the lack of continuity that people were reacting to. And it was pulling them out of the experience of the show because they were stuck. Instead of thinking about what was happening on stage, they're instead thinking, who the heck is that? You know, because it was just a big leap.
When they figure it out, like, they've lost some of the thread of the show. And then
you're thinking about the casting instead of about the story.
Yeah. And I wish it wasn't that way. I mean, I think we're as audience members, we're not really meant to sit there and be like lost about these things. Like, I don't think that there's any reason for outrage over the casting that they chose. Not. I think that there was probably good intention behind it.
I know there was. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, and every discussion that they've had about it, they're just like, look, we're trying to do something. We're trusting that you guys are gonna, you know, understand what's happening. And and people just didn't.
But what that brings to the conversation is this idea that people come to see certain pieces of theater with expectations.
Yeah.
And we talked, I think it was in the Hell's Kitchen episode where I mentioned, as I was writing the book about jukebox musicals, I found this brilliant comment by a reviewer from Chicago who said, you know, now that we've got all these jukebox musicals, we can kind of shake out and see what makes a good one. And one of the things that he mentioned was that the songs sound like the songs on the album. And that's absolutely true. If you look at Mamma Mia, if you look at Carole King, the Carole King musical, and Jersey Boys and On Your Feet, they sound like the albums.
Yeah.
The reason it came up in Hell's Kitchen is because that's an outlier. She played with all of her orchestrations and it works. And so that's an outlier. That one is the exception to the rule. But the same, I think, can be said for people coming in with expectations about how something is supposed to look. Yeah. So they expected, you go in to see The Notebook, you expect you are seeing the film on stage. Now, that's not the right expectation because, you know, every creator is going to do something different and they have artistic license to do it. But to the average theater goer who is in New York for a few days and wants to see a show, the title that they pick the show based on the title that they recognize, they're expecting to see Ryan Gosling and Rachel McAdams, basically. Yeah. Right. And when they don't get that full scale show that they're expecting, it's different. I'll give you a personal experience. Mary Poppins is one of my very favorite movies of all time. And I went to see Mary Poppins on Broadway in 2000. Gosh, what would it have been? 6, 7, whenever that was. I think we took my nieces and nephews to New York, 2007. So I go see it. I am so excited. I cannot wait. I'm taking 3 of my sister's 4 children. The other was too young to go. I am so pumped. And if you've seen Mary Poppins, the musical, you know, I was gravely disappointed. And it's not that the show wasn't great. I mean, we saw Ashley Brown, who's brilliant. I mean, her voice is unbelievable.
I love it now.
Right.
But at first it was like,
daggone it. This tap dances around the proscenium march. I mean, it is so cool, but it wasn't what I expected. So I was very disappointed.
I remember going, wow, this got dark.
Yeah, right.
I was
exactly. And so then I saw the show again, several years later when it was on tour, and I knew what to expect. So suddenly I wasn't gravely disappointed. I really enjoyed it, but you have a property that big and people have expectations and baggage attached to it. And when those are not met, the show closes early. And Mary Poppins did not run very long at all. I mean, it ran a couple of years, maybe 2, but it certainly wasn't with what you would think Mary Poppins would run, right? Yeah. Because most people were like me. It didn't match their expectation. And so I think with some of these shows, the reason that they aren't successful has probably nothing to do with casting and more to do with it doesn't match my expectation of the show, right?
Right. I mean, in that case, there's a reason. P.L. Travers.
That's right.
Signed the musical rights specifically away from Disney because she didn't like what they
He hated
really
the movie.
did.
Yeah.
Did not like the movie, and so did not really want them involved. But
that's right.
Cameron McIntosh, who had the rights, knew he couldn't do
you got to use Disney. Yeah.
You couldn't have a Mary Poppins without the iconic,
yeah,
part of that. And so, I mean, it was many years after she died.
Yes, that's right.
So, they had to, in order to fulfill the terms of the contract, like she, with her estate, they had to add in more of the dark elements,
the bookish elements.
Yeah, they did.
That's right.
And try to keep some of the iconic stuff as well. But again, you're right. Not what people expected.
And people don't know that. We know that because we're musical theater historians who live and breathe it. But most people just see Mary Poppins on a marquee and think, oh my gosh, Julie Andrews. Yeah. You know what I mean? And then they go in and they're disappointed. And I think that probably is a lot of the reason why this closed. But we've seen it time and time again.
Yeah, we've seen that happen. But I honestly do believe that, like,
the casting was an issue here.
If the casting had been a little bit more like consistent, people would have gone with it, whether they were black, white, purple, it wouldn't have mattered.
Doesn't matter.
The story was still being told. It was just that they kept being pulled out of the story at that moment. They were not ready for what they were being handed.
Yeah.
And again, this is why the podcast like this is. Now, y'all are going to see this while it's out on tour. And there's been a major change made to the casting out on tour. But I want to read you a little bit about from Brunstedter's website. Because it just opened a couple weeks ago. But she said, last year when we opened the Notebook musical on Broadway, we didn't get the critical reception we'd wanted. And isn't it embarrassing to admit you wanted to be like, but don't we all? She says, but it was crushing, upsetting, and humbling. Something we were told and told ourselves to get through that time is that the show would do really well on tour. And sure enough, the intrepid producers organized and announced a national tour of the show in conjunction with our closing announcement. The tour officially opened Friday night in Cleveland, and I knew I had to be there, even though I'm on a fairly remote island and in production, just to squeeze Ingrid's leg during the really magical parts, but also for me to heal. The show is pure love, and we actually felt it. I felt the show connecting to the audience in a way I'd always dreamt of. I felt like we were all holding each other. In front of Ingrid and I, a couple in their 80s held hands the whole show, her helping him turn up his hearing aid. And when the show ended, they turned to each other and kissed. Maybe we didn't get the pat on the head that we wanted, but I think time will reveal we got something even better, something more. So come out and see us on the road. If you look at the cast now on the road, they have kind of abandoned the non-continuity. All of the alleys are African American, and all of the Noahs are of white descent. So no one's going to get confused to take it out of it.
It's clear who's who.
And it seems to be doing much better on tour because of that.
Yeah.
Again, one of the reasons we do this is because, I mean, if you read the Broadway reviews, people are like, what in the heck is happening? The world is over. But it's like, read the reviews of the tour and you start realizing, okay, this is going a little smoother.
Than
it was before. We were talking before, and I have another former student in this particular cast, and it's interesting to see how much they really do try to keep their focus on, this is a timeless story that can happen to anyone. It doesn't matter what your race is. We are not getting into that, right?
Right, of course.
I mean, he is of, I think, Indian descent. They have a very, very diverse cast, but the continuity of the story, I think, is probably helped for the audience by that continuity. And this is just this is a symptom of doing something writing something that spans an entire lifetime.
Right.
If you
Epic.
go back, You go back to Aristotle. Aristotle's like,
unity of time and place.
Please make it within 24 hours.
Yes.
Right?
There's a reason for that.
It's like, otherwise we lose the thread. We have no idea who we're talking to. And
that's right.
It's very hard to do. And it's very hard for directors to make it work. Unless there is some continuity in that character. You can help things with costume. You can help things with blocking. There's a lot of ways you can do it, but it just wasn't enough apparently for the Broadway audience. But it seems to be going much better. So I mean, this is this is a great show. You're not walking into a show that doesn't look like The Notebook at all.
Right.
When you're walking into the touring audience, the touring production. This is a show that they tried something and they were really kind of gutsy.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
It just didn't work.
Right. Well, and this is an example of why shows try out of town. Now, granted, they ideally, by the old model, they could have tried out in Boston or New Haven or, Philly, Boston, or Baltimore, as the Cole Porter song goes. And they would have gotten this feedback before they opened on Broadway. Yeah. And who knows how it might have changed the trajectory of the show had they gotten this feedback and worked out this issue prior to opening on Broadway. Yeah. But they, it didn't happen that way for this show. But now they've course corrected and they say, okay, if this isn't playing well with audiences, then let's fix it and see how it plays if we do what is more in sync with their expectations. And it seems to be going really well for them. Yeah. So that's great.
Their out-of-town tryout, just to remind everybody, was at Chicago Shakespeare. So it's in Chicago at Chicago Shakespeare. And if you know anything about that company, very racially diverse country. Yeah. It's Shakespeare. There are no rules. And
that's right.
Their audiences, so the people that are previing it, are very, very used to that. Yeah. And don't let it throw them. Yeah. But Broadway audiences just weren't able to do it. So.
Yeah. 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 So there you go.
There you go.
Now you know.
I've been listening to it in my car for a week and a half now, and I mean, it's got really great music. It's very hummable. It's got moments where it's like, oh, that's got to be really cute on stage, and the rain moment. There's the rain moment where they're kissing in the rain, and you still get all of that you really, really needed and wanted.
Yeah, you got to have those iconic moments. Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, on that note, that'll do it for this episode of the Dr. Broadway podcast. Tune in next time when we'll be talking about The Outsiders, which, like both The Notebook and The Great Gatsby before it, opened on Broadway in 2024 and is based on the book by S.E. Hinton. Until then, connect with us via email at hello@drbroadway.com or on Instagram, YouTube, or TikTok at Dr. Bway Podcast.